I would like to welcome you very much to this launch of the International Talent Map. The idea of this benchmark and this map was born over a year ago, so we are very excited to now present the results for you. My name is Anna Broders. I am the Talent and Community Manager at Linköping Science Park. And together with Future Place Leadership, we took the initiative for this benchmark, which we have then done with a lot of great partners in Europe. Here to help us to dive into the report and the results is Morten from Future Place Leadership, who has been the one chasing answers, crunching the data, and gathering all the partners in the project. So, Morten, over to you.
Thank you, Anna, and maybe that was putting too much pressure on me, so to speak, in terms of what I had done, because really it's been a team effort. We've been busy here at Future Place Leadership preparing the launch for you, and we're so excited to do it. I think when I've been chosen to be the moderator here for today, what I'll try to do is basically walk you through, obviously, the findings, but also connect the dots between what we see in the research here with the experience we have at Future Place Leadership from the past decade plus, basically working with many of you. I see many good friends on the call, governments, regions, cities, intermediaries such as Science Park, where Anna is sitting, universities, or even directly with companies. So looking forward to that. We want to start by thanking a few people. This would not have happened without our very good friends from the Swedish innovation agency Vinnova, who gave us a substantial grant to conduct the research. So thank you to those. We've done this in great partnership with European Talent Mobility Forum. If you are unaware of who they are, you should be, and you will be now, because it's basically a program we launched at Future Place Leadership with entities across Europe who don't believe in the war for talent, who believe in talent mobility and talent collaboration. How can we come together as places across Europe to identify the best practices and solutions, both for global talent who want to relocate, as well as for companies who want to hire and retain international talent. So thank you to European Talent Mobility Forum. And of those members, thank you in particular to Work in Estonia, Biscaya Talent, Business Finland, Move to Gothenburg, Copenhagen Capacity, Brainport in Eindhoven, Scottish Enterprise and Talent Scotland, Berlin Partner in Berlin, and Oslo Region Alliance, who also have dedicated their brain, their hearts, and also a little finance to make sure that we could actually do this. So a warm thank you to all. Our plan for today is fairly simple. Why did we do it, and what did we actually do is kind of the opening, so you have the background. Then we'll simply skip millions of hours of research and data and whatnot and jump directly to what are the findings, and as well the overlap between findings and recommendations. You most likely have a lot of questions. Fantastic. We only booked you for 1 hour today, but please bear in mind the Q&A and the next step really is the beginning of the next 3 to 6 months, where we really want to go in with all of you interested in making this data come to life and discuss furthermore what can we do together across Europe. So we'll basically start some questions here, but it's an ongoing dialogue we expect for the next 3 to 6 months at least. And we have plenty of things to come in Q1 and Q2 next year. So do stay tuned for the next steps. As we believe that's more or less the most important part of this session. And then that's the magic trick, do that at the end so you stay the whole time, right, for the call. So jumping straight into it. Anna, you kind of touched upon it a little bit, that this has been a year in the making, but why? Why did we do it?
A really, really good question. In the beginning of 2022, Linköping Science Park got a program which is called Switch to Sweden. It's a national program, also financed by Vinnova. And the aim of the program is to connect international academic talents who are already in Sweden with Swedish companies. And when we got this program, we start thinking like, okay, how can we help these two target groups, the talents and the companies, in the best way? And well, let's ask them. So we conducted a survey and made a report, which was called the Talent Map, which we could say is like the 1.0 version of this map that we are doing today. So we asked the companies what their needs are, and that helped us to put the effort on what we are doing in Switch to Sweden, and gives us, of course, a lot of interesting insights for us in the project. But what we also realize, of course, is that this is not a challenge only in Sweden. and Sweden is not acting alone. And I really emphasize on what the European Mobility Forum is talking about. It's not the war for talent. We need to work together, but then we also need to have a common understanding to increase the possibility to collaborate with other countries. So that's why we got the idea, like how can we expand the 1.0 version and get in more perspectives from different countries, and then also do comparison, learn from each other, and see what we can do together. In the 1.0 version, we had Swedish international students or international students in Sweden, around 500 people answering, and also over 100 companies answering the survey. When we then start working on the 2.0 version, we saw that there was a wish to also include working professionals. So we have extended it both in like the geographical view, but also a bit in the target group, with also including the working professionals.
And jumping, moving forward from that, I recall, because we were part of that as well, one of the conclusions from the 1.0 switch to Sweden version was that it was mostly the soft landing, so the technical term for kind of immediately upon arrival, that the international students felt, the welcome wasn't optimized, and Sweden scored a 4 out of 10, and then everybody said, "Oh no, this is awful." And we kind of looked at it. That was kind of a really good point of departure for doing this, because maybe 4 is actually, in comparison to other countries, decent. Maybe a lot of other countries are too. So with the risk was that Sweden would do a lot of activation in areas where, relatively speaking, maybe it wasn't needed as much. So we really wanted to see, we're not competing with each other, but the benchmark really helps figuring out on a local level in a given country, and also, of course, internationally, where do we need to prioritize our efforts? Where are their main differences? So what we've done in this one is we kept kind of two main target groups, the talent side, as we call it, and the company side. So basically, we turned that into 3 target groups, if we say it more directly. Companies either interested in this topic, already employing international talent, or ready to do so. And then we divided talents basically into, or competences basically into 2 groups: those who are either studying a master or doing a PhD, and those already employed. And then, of course, we know when we do a survey, it's going to reach a lot of other people as well, which is perfectly fine. But predominantly people within tech and STEM, as of course we also know these are most sought after profiles. The way we did it was we really tried to mirror, and so it's 2 completely separate surveys, but of course we look for the magic in between those 2, or the mirror, so to speak. So for the talent survey, without showing you the entire survey, basically the main parts are: what overall do they see as kind of the opportunities and the barriers in relocating to another country? Then measuring more specifically the user journey, the customer experience, if you will, in every single stage of where they have been so far and been attracted to and living in. But then also zooming in more specifically, when push comes to shove, what are the decision-making factors for partly coming, but also what would make you leave, which is not us trying to push them out, but trying to figure out how can we keep them longer, or help them leave to the right next endeavor, if that is what they're looking for. And of course, what help do they need to succeed? And that kind of reflects a little bit also in the company survey, where we really wanted to see, are we still in the situation as all data points to? Does this matter? The access to competences and international talent, how important is that in the boardroom in 2023? Who kind of are you looking for? Where do you struggle with recruitment, particularly in the international section? And what are really the help that you are pointing to? And I think as we come towards the end of today, we'll see that there's a good synergy between the 2. They somewhat agree on what the challenges and opportunity are. So the target countries for this, we pushed it out in those partners you saw in the beginning. So it's predominantly international talents living in those countries, basically United Nations, in terms of which companies they represent. A total of around just short of 2,650 international talents, and 350 companies located across Europe. It differs slightly how many respondents we got from each country, and particularly on the company response. We have some countries where we have low responses, which is perfectly okay. It just means statistically, if we were to make a lot of conclusions based on, for example, Finland, it might be skewed to those few companies who took the survey in that country. Hence, for the actual comparison between companies, on the data and then between countries, we're more looking at the talent area. When we look at company responses, we look at the 350 companies as a whole. A few other, maybe just as we get started, data. We have a pretty good split of gender, particularly since a lot of STEM responses. We're quite happy that we're close to a 50-50 ratio of female and male. We have a lot of non-European countries. So in the top 10 list of passports taking the survey, so to speak, we have outside of Europe, it's India, it's Pakistan, it's China, it's the US, it's Nigeria, among others, that are all in the top 10. Interestingly, 6 out of 10 international talent who took the survey, for example, have already spent more than 6 months somewhere else. So maybe it's certain, once you do your first international assignment, it's something that you get hooked on. I can tell about that from my personal experience, but that'll be another day. Time won't allow that. Age group, about 80% are born between 1980 and 2000. And if you go, how old are they? I did the calculation beforehand. So roughly 25 to 45-year-old. And lastly, I would say as we begin, we're not facing a big problem here. 7 out of 10 of these people are generally satisfied with their international experience so far. On the company side, just to give you a quick insight there, 8 out of 10 company representatives, and it's mainly HR and leadership taking this survey. 8 out of 10 are saying access to talent is a key challenge for us in the boardroom right now, and not just the attraction of them, but particularly also the retention of it. And yes, international talent does make a difference. So that's kind of the background data. You can see here split between how are we on the working professionals versus the student side of things, PhD, and then a few other categories, for example, the self-employed. And the new invented titled a freelancer, which is, of course, a freelancer or a startup. We were so busy getting ready for today that there might be a typo here and there. Apologies for that. If you look at the company side, we group them into industries, but fairly heavy on tech and communication, IT, and professional business services. A lot of consultancies, such as the one we represent at Future Place Leadership. Now, we could present to you a million things. We promise you there will be full access to the data, and the report is being sent to you immediately upon this closure of this meeting as well. So we really encourage you to dive into the data, because there's so much we do not have time to cover, or on purpose decided not to, so you will actually read the report, right? It's also a trick you can do. But zooming in on the key findings, which we want to prioritize in this meeting. 5 key learnings we took, and to a certain degree, maybe partly reinventing the wheel for those who are really engaged in this industry. We did find some surprising things, but now also really strong data support to support what we know many of you are literally working on. So number 1, it's not about the place or the job, it's about both. And there's kind of 2 aspects to that. Number 1, we asked the talent responses literally to tell us what matters the most. And remember, we're asking both students and working professionals. So deciding to relocating to another country, is it the place, is it the job, or is it the education? So those 3 options. And 40% roughly are saying, well, it's the place. So we're really in the world of employer and place branding. You're not moving for the job or the university, you're moving for both, also the place that you're living in. So those needs to come together. And specifically then on the drivers, we've heard it before in other reports and data, this confirms it. We're really, in the last 5 years, taking a shift towards more work-life balance that matters, which again means things need to come together, the place and the life and the job, being a student or a working professional. Salary doesn't score high, comes further down on list, and we'll get back to that when I show you the actual data. It's more about the place and the opportunity to develop and pursue a career in a given place. Now, we're not going to point any fingers on this call, but we definitely there's a risk or companies just need to do this and that, and then everything's okay. Companies, of course, know exactly what they are doing. But what we are seeing is maybe the classical twist between walk the walk and talk the talk. We also saw that in the 1.0 switch to Sweden, that companies do say, yes, we are born global, we are international, local language doesn't matter. But and that might be the message overall from leadership, but then when we go down to actual hiring processes and the decisions of the hiring manager, then maybe we're not as open, and we really either perceive that there are a lot of barriers or experience a lot of barriers. And no surprise, obviously the processing and work permits really comes out strong as an issue. That's why we struggle or don't do hiring of international talent. But there's a lot of interesting insight related to also the corporate languages and cultural challenges of international talent that we'll get back to in the recommendations. If we look from the talent side of things, what are the barriers in the decision-making process? Well, if we're recruiting from non-EU countries, we can't make the world flat or make other countries come closer. So the long distance to family and friends back home is, of course, something you cannot change, apart from either deciding to do something to support those people, or obviously attract from closer markets. But really interesting is how the unfriendly, not welcoming country comes up very high in our survey as a barrier. We know, of course, we have a tendency at times across Europe to have more right-wing pro governments. We're not going to go into politics on this call, but what does it affect a given country when the main message is coming out from government perceived by the international audiences? Hey, we don't want you. Well, it affects very negatively. And then, of course, as those of you working in the industry, I'm moving to a given country. I don't know a single soul here. For me to be happy, it's not about the job or all the sites the place has. It's also about being part of a community, and lack of access to basically friends is an issue. If I don't have a social life, I won't be happy, and I will leave. Moving on as well, what we also see is basically companies, close to 50% of the companies in the survey are telling us, we don't know enough about this area. We want to know more. So that's basically a pray for help, which is very interesting, but it also come across as this is an issue. They don't have the competences enough, particularly smaller companies who of course don't have an HR department. How can we actually go in and make them aware of what needs to be done? Related to an interesting discussion, if we're talking about the arrival into a country and the integration of these individuals, whose responsibility is that? 9 to 5, they are with the employer. 5 to 9, they're out in the world, roughly speaking, right? So is it the public sector, is the government, is the city who needs to take care of that? Or to what degree is the company's responsibility? Because there's clearly in this data another indicator that it's really about the 9 to 5 where things go wrong, as well as some things we can do in the workplace. I'm from Denmark, and I know from experience, Denmark, we love our coffee, right? So, during the workday, if you are fully on site and not remote, you meet in the coffee by the machine for a chatter. 9 times out of 10, that conversation is in Danish, not in English, for example. And then you as an international employee miss out on that little extra something that makes you feel part of the company and the culture and the belonging with your employees. How do we change such things? When we first dial in, and I'll see you top of my screen, I see friends at International House Gothenburg dialing in. We've seen international houses and expat centers popping out left and right all over Europe. It only excites us, because that's also what we see as a really strong indicator of the solution. How can such centers, physically as a meeting point, as an access point, but also digitally in all of these bureaucracy maneuvering part we need to do? How can these places really be a strong part of the solution? That's what the data tells us. We need to do more of that and do it even better. I'm from Denmark, as I said, and an old colleague from International House Copenhagen once said, you cannot digitalize a warm welcome. So finding the balance between digital solutions and the warm welcome personalized is probably a strong indicator here. So are we comparing apples and bananas? That would also be a good starting point. So without asking beyond asking the people taking the survey, we also asked our partners here and did a little bit research of our own. To what degree in these countries where we predominantly did the outreach, do we in fact have on national level a strategy for international talent? And it's roughly 50-50, maybe 60-40 in terms of yes and no. So of course that also impacts if you have a strategy and resource behind it, then maybe you're doing more. So that's also kind of just a starting point for you to keep at the back of your mind. I think across all of these countries and across Europe, we see and have seen at Future Place Leadership in the last decade, more and more entities on city, region, and country level are stepping into this field. What can we do as public officials, as governments, in supporting universities and companies in attracting and retaining international talent? So everybody's kind of, a lot of countries are stepping into this field, and also in certain area highly advanced in what they are doing. Across some of our participations here, we found some interesting reference points for you as well. We always have been a fan of, and we hear that from industry peers. And so welcome to everybody dialing in from Finland, and kudos to you. If you, the audience from all over the world, are not aware of Talent Boost Finland, that would be a good one to look into, because that's really from a government level and city and regional level, when we see such a great effort both in the mindset of working together, but also with the activities coming out of it. How can things be done? If you don't, if you're on the no list, we don't have a government strategy. I highly recommend you to go to Denmark, and that's not me being biased, being a Viking myself, but it's looking from peers, the State of Denmark Coalition. There's kind of a bottom-up approach from cities and regions all across Denmark coming together. Really, really strong collaboration platform that could be inspiring to you. Our project owner, Linköping Science Park, are sitting there in Sweden, go, I wish we had a strategy. There's a lot of activities happening in Sweden right now. So really encourage you to pay close attention to the Swedish market. Interesting things to come for sure. And then if you look at let's just go to Germany, for example. I think a lot of discussions are very interesting on how do we actually do the law in this area? And on one hand, how do we define skilled migration and from third countries? And I think we'll get back to Germany later in our talk as well. And Norway is really onto something, because a lot of it comes maybe slightly technical when we are talking about migration and integration, but in fact, is it more about inclusion really that is the conclusion in this corner? We want to check in with Norway a little bit later what they say about that. So just showing you some data. This is also how the report is structured, with a lot of figures and insights, partly with conclusions there and partly for you to interpret yourself. I've already covered how important the place is, in addition to the job as a decision-making factor for relocate. Probably what is interesting here, that the work-life balance comes really strong and strongest in deciding to live in another country. But once you're then looking specifically for a job, then it's professional growth. It's not the salary, but it's really how can I come and develop myself as an individual. And again, that's an interesting point where the place comes together, because there's something the job and the company can do here, but there's also something with the larger industry. We can look at what are really the synergies across in a given industry that you can benefit from. Zooming in on that decision-making factor, should I stay or should I go, as we call it? Almost sound like a song, right? We are partly Eurovision here with everybody dialing in. At the end of the day, if there are no career opportunities, then I won't stay. So the job really comes in high. But let's not forget, work-life balance still matters a lot. So have I settled in satisfactory, or me and my accompanying family, whether that's he and she in terms of spouse and kids and whatnot. I want to just touch quickly on number 3, higher level of social stability and security. Probably not in the data 10 years ago, but in the world of turmoil and changes we've been living in the last 3-5 years, basically from post-pandemic to what's going on right now in various places of the world, from Ukraine to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. This is an increasingly something that matters. Am I relocating to a place where there's stability in government and democracy, and the security for my, not just my well-being in the work-life balance, but literally for my life. And again, note that financial incentive really comes further down the list. So if you're a company, yeah, by all means, offer the highest possible salary you want, but it's probably not at the end of the day what's going to make the decision-making factor from the talents. Then again, we didn't send out the survey when they literally had to pick between 2 job offers. So that's also interesting. What do you say in the survey, and what do you actually do? Challenges in staying long-term, and let's remember here we have a lot of students in the survey, and maybe for them, the challenge between moving from a student visa to a work visa, we know from experiences, can be quite bothersome in many countries. But basically, not being eligible for the resident permanent or is the key issue, or that is just simply as a nightmare and takes far too long. But also not having contacts to employers. So are we doing as we are in the country? Are we exposing them to the various career opportunities? Probably not, because that's what they need in order to stay. And the native language. Now, you probably need a PhD to quickly, digest what's happening in this slide, but to show you an example of how we are comparing countries in the survey. Here, we're literally looking at the drivers of why come to a given country in a comparison between the various countries. And I'll just touch on a few things, and then leave you more to dive into the report when you receive it, whatever has the most of your interest. But case in point, what I mentioned just before around safety. We have safety being the highest issue of the participating countries in Estonia and Finland. And then again, who in our survey, from a country point of view, are closest to the conflict between Russia and Ukraine? Well, it's those countries. So we can see directly in the data how that plays out. We can also see an interesting case of, if you go, for example, to Finland, and some of the campaigns that have come out in terms of attracting international talents, say some of the latest Helsinki campaigns, for example, has very much talking about Finland as a place where you can literally experience your personal freedom. And again, it shows you in the data, it's also what they resonate with. Finland comes out strongest on personal freedom. So there's also a balance between what you market yourself as or believe to be, and what the talents perceive that you are. Scotland scores really high, for example, in academics and possibility to develop my career. Scotland is also the participating country who has the highest ratio of students in the survey. So of course, you also need to know a little bit of the mechanisms behind the data before you make conclusions. If we go to STEM versus non-STEM, we also looked at specifically towards the target group. Here, maybe one interesting conclusion, not on this slide, is that non-STEM talents, actually to a higher degree than STEM, favor English-speaking countries as the targeted country they would like to be, whereas STEM talents are more open to, for example, as they point out, countries like Germany and Sweden and Denmark, where of course we don't have English as the official language. And it may relate a little bit to what they're looking for is more the work-life balance and the professional growth they experience, less so than the specific career opportunity. And maybe because if you're STEM, you are really sought after and you don't really need to worry about that. But maybe there's a coalition between STEM people really being open to the lifestyle of the Nordic countries, for example, that are more maybe work-life balance prone in the welfare society that has been created than elsewhere. What we also did is what we launched in the survey, or coming out of the survey, what we call a mobility attractiveness index. And without being too technical, we basically had a long list of countries, 50 countries worldwide, and included the countries where we have most of our respondents currently living in. And then we excluded, if you're international talent living in Germany, you cannot vote Germany in this ranking. So basically, where are you looking to move towards, or where would you be interested in moving to as a global talent? And here, the winners, because this really is a winning category in terms of, do you have a potential to attract more? Really, Germany, Spain, and Denmark came out in the lead, which is obviously good for them. And if you're not as strong here, well, maybe we need to look at what are some of the reasons behind that. There's a slight disclaimer: Scotland technically should be higher because you also had the opportunity to vote UK. So there's a technical thing in that data. But congrats to Germany. There is something going on in Germany that makes it attractive to international talents, according to our data. I won't talk for much longer. We want to open up for discussions, but just showing you here some of the barriers on. So now we're switching to the company side. As mentioned in the beginning, it's basically the processing time for work permits that is the biggest hindrance. And then we get into more culture and language. They point out specifically, as I said, when we opened up this call, close to every second company are saying we need more knowledge in this area. What is their need? Help understanding the legal complexities. They don't know how to start or where to find the international talent and understand recruitment as a whole. and they don't have structured processes in their company which is stopping them from do so. So who can help them with that? Who can help them navigate the bureaucracy that they are facing as hiring entities, and who are the partners that they can do that for them? So in conclusion, before we start a dialogue here, what are the overall recommendations? And they are a direct link from the findings that you have seen. We really need to look at this far beyond actual recruitment and relocation of international talent. So in the recommendations, we try to look at what can companies do, what can places, public sector do, and what can talent do. And that might be a failed mission in the way that, let's be honest, for this to succeed, it really is everybody needs to come together and work together. So it's not isolated, companies must do this and governments must do that. And we also, we'll show that in the next slide, we need to be careful. We could also not put pressure on international talent, but also be honest and truth. Hey, if you want this adventure, if you want to be part of this exciting part of the world, you also need to step up, and part of the responsibility for success is on you. We cannot just lean back and point the finger at somebody else in society. So really look at this holistically, the 24/7 life, the cycle of a given individual, the soft landing, and how can we do much more onboarding and integration into our society, into our workplace culture and workplace way of doing things, but also outside of things. How can we really attack what seems to be the biggest challenge for companies? We don't really want to do this because we're speaking Swedish or we're speaking Dutch, and we don't want to change everything into English. And the international talents who, yeah, I want to learn the language, but it's going to take me years to be fluent or even understand enough. But in the workplace, they switch to the local language the moment I turn around, and then I feel I'm left out. How can we really zoom in and consider that, yes, we have our corporate culture, we are happy on diversity, but how can we really adapt to culturally also this workforce? Here's a funny example, not from the survey, right? But many of us right now are sending Christmas greetings out. Are we saying Merry Christmas? Or are we saying Happy Holidays? Well, Merry Christmas might be mistaken to many internationals who don't celebrate that because they have a different religion, right? So there's few things you can do here and there. One of the things we've seen clearly from the survey is that if you are an international student and you secure a part-time job, relevant job opportunity, you tend to be much happier and stay longer in the country. So to what degree can we further grab the international students while they're there before they leave and provide work opportunities for them? And of course, if you are an employer, whether you're recruiting international talent or local talent, this is a trend we've seen, really a strong focus on career development, rather long-term, rather than necessarily the highest salary. But how can we really do that much stronger to the international target group as well? If you're relocating from halfway around the world, you're not just considering that one job, you're considering the place and the long-term aspects of a career, multiple years for you, as well as for your accompanying spouse, if you have he or she doing that with you. Government, public sector, please streamline the process, make it so much easier than it is right now. It is a nightmare. I relocated a US spouse to Denmark. I'm currently dialing in from Colorado, where I'm the spouse, relocating to the US. I've done this paperwork a million times, and it's absolutely awful, even though it's gotten 10 times better than it was 10 years ago. And dear international talent, we love you. I know some of you are on the call, but please don't lean back and just expect society to fix everything from you. You're going to get an exciting adventure in country X, but you also need to step up and literally do active civic participation to succeed. And there are great tips in what you need to do in this report and elsewhere as well. I'll finish with this. Interestingly, most sought after profile are typically the STEM, the tech, and the engineers. When we look across the various profiles in our data, they are also the ones that are more happy than others of this global workforce. So maybe the most sought after profile, as they're also the most happy ones, let's start making sure we do more of those So they're even more happy, and then kind of it spreads from there. Fix the bottlenecks elsewhere that we see. And there are a lot of bottlenecks. There is a lot of work to do. A lot of you are doing it already. I think this survey, these partners show on a European level, there's a lot of entities who want to do this together. So the main message from me as well, with the data, with the insights, with the recommendations, let's get to work. Lastly, if you're dialing in from some of the countries in the survey and you go, well, what about our data? Don't worry, it's in the report specifically about the respondents that have taken your survey. That was a kind of a 25-minute walkthrough of the findings, leaving us more or less on time for what we had planned next, opening up for a little discussion. In doing so, we have close to 200 people on the call. If you missed the beginning, we have maybe 30 Frederick Larsens in the call as well. There's a technical glitch. So if you're tired of being called Frederick, please go up in the 3 dots on top and change your name. If not, rest assured, we have complete GDPR structure here because so many Fredericks that there's nothing to worry about. The way we're going to do this, because we have so many people on the call, is please go to the chat and fire away whatever question you have. And we'll have a closer look at the chats, see which questions are really interesting and talk about them in a few minutes. We will collect every single question. We'll either do kind of a Q&A landing page on the main website, or we'll send you an email with, directly, you know what, we didn't have time to cover your question, but here's our specific answer. We promise to follow up. Now, while you're thinking about your main question, I just want to go to a few places because I touched upon that in our presentation. So one of the things we saw, for example, and I'm trying to look to see if we have an Oslo representative, for example, if Mari is here, because that real soft landing discussion that needs to be better. Norway is doing something interesting. Rather than talk about more the technical term of integration or immigration, the Norwegian government is basically talking about inclusion. And Maya, I'm wondering if you're here to offer a little comment on what's happening in Norway on a more inclusion level.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
We can indeed. Hi, Maya. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good, thanks. Well, you be the judge of that, depending on how the presentation was. But for now, thoughts in Norway on inclusion?
Yeah, no, inclusion is a big deal, and I think this presentation just really proves it. We talked a little bit about that before as well, but some of the reasons why we wanted to do a survey was to understand what the drivers were, but also are they settling in properly? And that is something that the Norwegian government has also considered, as probably a lot of other European countries. We experienced a big immigration, especially after 2004. And I think the initial idea from the Norwegian government, at least, was that these people are here temporary. Looking back on the last, 17 years, they now conclude that most of them haven't returned, actually, and they are staying put in Norway. But because we were thinking about these people as temporary, we didn't initiate any programs or any activities that would actually include them into Norwegian society. So as you did mention, there was a public report that came out in the end of 2022. And what it basically proposes is that it's hopefully, according to this report, they're proposing that there's going to be a differentiated integration policy for labor immigrants based on their stay, their country of origin, and maybe their skill level. But basically, it says that we need to do a lot more on language training, especially integrating families, not just the son or the daughter of the work immigrants who are coming temporarily, but the whole family. It's the information and communication about before you come, when you're here, and actually after you have left. We're looking into career guidance for spouses and partners. It's going to be a main focus. And also recognition of qualifications. So people actually do get the job that they're qualified for, not having to settle for something less. And then the last part, obviously, is the social inclusion part. How do we get them to connect in society? How do we get them to understand the value of volunteering the way we do in Norwegian or in Norway society? So all those things, how can we get them to settle in? And that, is retention. It's really about retention and keeping people here and thriving.
Thank you, Mai. I want to do one more. I want to go to the Netherlands. I want to go to Brainport, because what we saw in the data was, of course, particularly for the more younger professionals coming out of university, access to companies really is an issue. They don't have that network. In our survey, Netherlands scores the highest in having solved that. It's really where the respondents say that's the least problem, so to speak, compared to other countries. They score the lowest being it's somewhat fixed in the Netherlands. And Nicole, if you're with us from Brainport, is there a magic formula to inspire others on this access to companies coming out of the Netherlands?
Yes, I'm here. I hope you can hear me.
We can indeed. Hi, Nicole.
Okay, great. Hi, all. Yeah, well, I don't know if there's a magical formula, I would say, but the least thing I know is that we have been focusing on international talent attraction and retention for over 15 years now. So we built up a very strong collaboration together with the employers, universities, but also with the province and the national government. So I would say it's a multi-layered collaboration. So you start looking at which stakeholders do we need, what do we want to improve and make it concrete. And we in the south of the Netherlands, we have a sort of it's in our DNA to collaborate. So we have a strong focus on high tech and manufacturing. So if things are impossible, then we don't stop, but we collaborate and see how can we still make changes. And in fact, it's not only about R&D, for example, but it's also the way we work together to improve our approach towards international talent. So, yeah, as I already mentioned, we have been having a strong focus for a lot of years now, and also on a national level, we are working with a talent coalition to align, and again with a focus on talent attraction and retention on a national level, together with Amsterdam, The Hague, Utrecht, and many other cities and regions, but also with our government to the Netherlands point of entry. And what we have been seeing is that if you really want to make changes and set things in motion, we all know the importance of data and intelligence. So the minute we decided together with all of you, okay, we want to do this, we want to have a benchmark, and we have to have more insights in what is going on in the international community, then we are going, we seek the collaboration, and we make promises and we do so. So that's, I think, something also which is very important for us in the Netherlands, and especially in the southern Eindhoven. So yeah, I would say start with a small stakeholder group and then extend to other stakeholders which you are in need of to collaborate to really make changes.
Thank you, Nicole. I was just going to add to this subject that before I joined Future Place Leadership, I worked for Copenhagen Capacity in Greater Copenhagen, and we started going into how can we support universities on student retention and establish what was then called the Youth Goodwill Ambassador Corps, basically an honorary program for international talent students already in Denmark, trying to pave their way, transition into the Danish labor market. And what we saw back then, I'll keep this short, was basically at that point of time, the effort of international student retention was, zoomed in on the 3 months surrounding graduation, which by then was too late because they already were out of money. They've been living in expensive Denmark for quite a while. They were more or less out of a visa, and they didn't have access to any companies. So we kind of switched the mindset that retention does not start at graduation; it starts upon arrival, the moment they are in the country. I want to go back to our good friends in Linköping Science Park, Anna, and I also know Hella, because maybe you've kept an eye on the chat. Any good, interesting questions we should pick up here and have the discussion from in the next few minutes?
Well, the chat is going wild, I would say. There are a lot of different questions popping up. There is some questions I think would be interesting to touch upon is regarding the companies and what kind of companies have been answering. We've got a question from Peter Hansson from Terminal 5. If we, to what extent has the survey against employers and employees actually target blue-collar occupations and not just STEMs?
Fantastic question. And there's a lot of interesting stuff happening in this area. And if you're getting to know me, I'm almost a politician that I take a given question and go a complete different direction and then maybe zoom back to your actual question. So let me start with what's interesting. initially in my response. 10 years ago, when we talked about global mobility and places, all about the so-called expat. I don't even think that term exists anymore, but that highly skilled individual who can do she something that nobody else can do, highly educated and whatnot. And that of course still exists, but particularly in the last 5 years, coming out of the pandemic and the labor market as it is right now, international mobility, and this is straight to the point to the question, is so much more also about what about the electrician for the green transition? What about the nurses for our healthcare system? What about the teachers for our schools? What about the chefs or the waitresses or the receptionists for our service industry and the tourism sector? So really, the question is on point. It is basically every single skill right now that is part of that, and of course, the drivers of those kind of qualifications and individuals may and often will differ from the other. Then to the actual question, that was the side comment, right? That was more than the politician, even though I don't vote for parliament or run for parliament anywhere. Basically, what we did, it was kind of an outreach throughout our databases and the partnership database of the companies that they are working with. So no, we did not specifically go after companies who are looking more for those kind of competencies. Our point of departure was more, we wanted to be in dialogue with companies who we knew already had experience in this matter, so they could give us intelligent answers on the struggles. But as I answered initially, this is a really, really great topic. And it's something we are seeing more and more dipping into. How can we actually help those kind of more vocal qualifications? So for sure, it's relevant and on par with where we want to take the discussions on a European level, for sure.
But what we also saw going through the answers is that like the STEM competence is needed in more and more different industries. It's not only the software companies, it's everybody needing some kind of STEM talents in some way as well. So
yes,
the need is growing.
Without going technical, then we as we showed initially, we grouped the companies into I think it was 9 different categories or larger industries. And we, of course, when we asked about your challenges in recruitment and whatnot, everybody agreed that this is, across industry, this is a big discussion point in management group. Everybody agrees that this is only going to be harder to recruit in the future. However, interestingly, particularly the healthcare sector and manufacturing and heavy industries stood out as those 2 industries we thought the future looks most black related to recruitment. They're the most worried industries related to recruitment. And as Anna specifically said, the topics they need, the skills they need to recruit are basically techies and engineers, even for manufacturing and heavy industries. So that's also an interesting insight.
Thank you. There are also some questions about accommodations and housing, partly from Berlin, who have a challenge in finding accommodations for international talent. And we also got a question more regarding if, as a part of the soft landing initiative, is temporary housing accommodation taken into consideration?
2 quick comments to that. Maybe we should have highlighted that more, actually. It was a surprise to us because we agreed that in the general discussion around this, housing always comes out as a very important issue. And one of our initial conclusions, at least our talents or skills who responded in this survey, did not pick the housing issue as strong as we normally see. So that's maybe where this data conflicts, whether that's a trend or a new norm in the market. Probably way too early to say, because we are aware that also what, among others, is stopping Berlin for being very active in talent attraction is, well, if we don't have housing, why would we attract them? Where would they live? And my response sometimes to that is, well, if the companies need them, then we gotta still attract them and figure out the housing issue. We cannot put the economy on hold because of that. I would say this, and I don't have the answer to why. It seems that if you compare STEM and non-STEM are more worried about housing than STEM. So I don't know if STEM are more happy to sleep in a tent or what it is, but at least there's an indication there that is interesting to further figure out why is that.
I think like we have a lot of data and we have started digging, but there are always, of course, new angles and even more questions to ask. So we can start planning for the 3.0 version. We got actually an interesting question regarding other similar studies, for example, from the OECD, the BCG, and the Internations that try to rank countries' attractiveness.
Yes.
Is there anything that differs from our survey in comparison with these?
There are a lot of good studies out there. I would say, I mean, we mirrored our survey somewhat from some of the existing ones, making sure we covered. I was part myself, for example, in supporting the Danish expat study. We've been doing the Berlin expat study, because back to Berlin, interestingly, post-pandemic, Berlin normally, and still to a certain degree, and we see that from the attractiveness index we created, very strong brand, particularly in the creative and tech industry. But post-pandemic, Berlin had a net immigration deficit all of a sudden. So in Berlin and Germany, more focused on typically how do we fix the more German bureaucracy for the international financial attraction, because they're coming by default. Then they stopped coming by default, and Berlin said what to do. So there's also, we did a Berlin expat study for them. I would say if you go, for example, we're a huge fan of the INSEAD study, the index that they have. That's probably more on macro level. So a lot of data that they're pulling together, but probably as a doer, limits a little bit what can I do to move up from 10 to 5 in the ranking, because it's more based on statistical data, but it gives a really strong, comprehensive insight into how your economy as whole is positioned towards attracting and retaining international talent. The Expat Insider, also a great study. We probably have more respondents from our target countries, so it's a little bit more statistic valid in certain of our countries. What we like the most about this study is that it's really the doers, the practitioners, now the various entities you saw who are literally doing this, that really help form what are the critical questions we really need to address. So I would say, do dig in, do your research, do look into all of these surveys. This is as recent as of now. So of course, latest data in the field, but also really a practitioner-based survey. What is it the practitioners in this field want to ask the target group, and giving the vast experience they have, both working with talents and companies, optimized in that regard. And then really the mindset of this survey is looking towards how can we solve this together. So we really probably, questions may be very similar, but our mindset, which I would say different a little bit. We are so much collaboratively across Europe, solution oriented in looking for recommendations that we can do together. So maybe this survey differs in that now we have the data, but now we're getting to work together. That's probably the biggest difference. And maybe if we have time for, and maybe that leads not to next steps, but maybe last question should go to our friends from Switch to Sweden and Linköping Science Park. It's kind of, we started this talk with the 1.0 version, focusing on students in Sweden, and now go over internationally. What has been kind of your biggest insight before we talk about what's going to happen next, or what stands out to you between, let's call it 1.0 and 2.0?
Well, of course, it is always, like you also said in the beginning, it's also always good to compare yourself with others and to see how we stand in comparison to other countries. So that has gained great insights. And also to get input on, okay, which countries can we ask for help and which countries can we follow and learn more from to see what they are doing. For example, Nicole talked about Eindhoven and how they are work with companies there. I can recognize the way of the need for collaboration in that part of the Netherlands. It's the same in Linköping, where we're acting. We're quite small in comparison, so there the collaboration is important. But then more like concrete tasks on how can we do this collaboration. I think also an insight that we've got is that time is important. It takes time to work with these kind of structures. And here we have a lot to learn from the different partners in the in this report on what they have done and what we can continue with. Also, I think, and we talked about it earlier, but the need for STEM, and it's partly about, of course, getting the companies to get access to this type of talents, but also to get the talents to understand why is STEM needed in so many different places. And there, my colleague Ella, who is in the call as well, doing a great job talking with the talents about this and get them to understand. And I think this data helps us even more to talk to the talents and say, like, okay, if you want to do a career in one European country, not necessarily Sweden, then these are competences that are needed.
Thank you, Anna. As we're coming towards the end, one of my favorite quote is, this is, in fact, this is not the end. It's probably not even the beginning of the end, but it is perhaps the end of the beginning. What do I mean by that? I mean, many of you have worked in this for a very long time. We are, as we said, using this data to go to work. So what's going to happen fairly soon? In literally 4 minutes, the project partners will jump into another meeting room and literally start talking very specifically. What can we do now? How can we move from data to action? And that's a journey we invite you to be part of as well. You, of course, will get the full report. There's so many aspects we didn't have time to cover, or on purpose didn't cover, so we knew you would actually read the report as well. One thing for now, of course, in this, we have so much different dimensions we can play with. One thing we really want to play with in Q1 is, if you are moving across borders, are you moving to a country, or are you moving to a city, or are you moving to a region? For now, we are comparing more on country level, but of course, you move to a place, a given city. So we're going to look at a more city regional level. What are the drivers and differences there across Europe? So that's to come. I think now there was a question on, there's a lot of surveys and existing reports out there. Right now, we're in dialogue with many good entities, IOM on the United Nations, ICMPD, among others. OECD has a lot of data. We're going to go and try and see if we can get some of these more policy recommendations in line with some of the drivers we see from the users, and have a more EU level discussion in Brussels. So we're probably going to do that fairly in the next year. We did this project basically on the idea of open source. So if you want to play with the data, it is accessible. We've cleaned it up for any GDPR related issues, so you can access that. Just don't earn millions on it unless you, of course, let us know and share that. No, just kidding. We don't want you to use it commercially, but use it in good faith to develop solutions that benefits companies and international talents. And then, of course, do give credit to the beneficiaries, because we're still very thankful for those who've been involved in the product. As you saw, so we did the initial switch to Sweden, literally in Sweden. Then we expanded, not a strategic decision to go towards Western Europe and certain countries, but more, where do we know good entities who are working in this field across the Nordics and beyond? What we're going to do next is we actually have a pilot that instead of going more west, we're going to go more east. So the most eastern country in the survey right now is Estonia. So we're going to have a little pilot going more east from Estonia throughout the Baltic and Eastern Europe, and see what the drivers are there in comparison to those countries. And if you are so disappointed, why is my country not on the list? Well, then maybe we can change that. So be in touch if you have an interest in taking the survey to your specific country, and we can do a little appendix on how your data then fits into the current benchmark that exists. Lastly, this was a huge undertaking. We are happy to do it again, but probably survey overload and too frequent to do it every year. But now we have a baseline. And of course, we're going to put a lot of efforts into action. And unless we measure how that action then changes the landscape, we won't be more wise. So that is then the last thing for you to know. This is coming back, but more as a biannual activity. Last but not least, thank you to all the Frederick Larsens listening in. If you missed the beginning, there was a glitch. So if you've been Frederick for an hour, do enjoy that. It is a great Swedish name, but please don't be a stranger. We know many of you on the call. We're eager to extend the dialogue we have already from Future Place Leadership or from Linköping Science Park across Europe and across the world on how do we fix this. and be in touch and expect the report to be sent to your inbox fairly soon. With that, I'll leave for Anna to close the session. Thank you so much from Future Place Leadership and me, Morten King-Grubert here.
Thank you very much, Morten, for this presentation. A lot of data which we were able to squeeze in for this hour, and I really hope that you enjoyed diving deeper into the report that will be sent out, I think, as we speak. And let us know your insight, thoughts, questions, and let's work together on this in the future. So thank you very much for today, and hope you have a nice day.
Thank you all.